My identity used to be simple: Jessica Whitaker, a 34-year-old mother living in the quiet expanses of Santa Fe, New Mexico, working diligently as an education coordinator for a local museum. I believed in quiet hard work, until the day my own brother decided my innocent 6-year-old daughter was nothing more than a punchline for an online audience. It was a typical Saturday, spent leading an energetic children's workshop focused on desert wildlife. By the time I finished, I was still wearing my official staff name badge, with remnants of craft glue dried onto my sleeve. Suddenly, the phone in my palm began to vibrate so violently it felt like a panicked alarm ringing in the dark. My initial instinct was fear. I thought a medical emergency or an accident had struck my household. But when I unlocked the screen, the reality was a completely different kind of nightmare. I was staring at a photograph of my own little girl. The image captured Harper sitting atop a brightly painted wooden coyote statue right outside a community festival booth. Her small cheeks were flushed pink with genuine, untainted laughter, and one of her hands was captured mid-air in that beautiful, slightly blurry wave that young children make when they are completely oblivious to the fact that someone is transforming their innocence into digital content. But it wasn't the image that made my blood run cold, it was the text beneath it. My older brother, Caleb, had uploaded it with a devastatingly cold caption: "Some mistakes grow up and make more mistakes." The betrayal cut deep, but the reaction from my own mother, Diane Whitaker, was the true twist of the knife. Right below his words, she had reacted with 3 laughing emojis. Not a single accidental press, but 3 distinct, public signs of amusement. Within minutes, a cascading avalanche of digital cruelty began. Extended family cousins, next-door neighbors, old acquaintances from our church circle, and individuals who barely even recognized my face began piling on, adding mocking comments, and calling the post savage. Eventually, an acquaintance chimed in to declare that our family's sense of humor was completely undefeated. Amidst this digital feeding frenzy, my husband, Ethan Brooks, was the sole voice of reason. He didn't leave a comment, he didn't laugh, and he didn't utter a single patronizing phrase telling me to calm my emotions. Instead, he looked directly into my panicked eyes, gently took the vibrating device out of my trembling fingers, and gave a single, calculated directive: screenshot everything. In that exact, frozen moment, a chilling realization washed over me. I knew with absolute certainty that this violation was not going to be resolved with a simple, awkward apology over a tense family dinner. When I first witnessed the post, I didn't scream or explode with rage, a fact that deeply surprised me because I always assumed public humiliation would cause a person to lose their mind. Instead, a strange, hollow silence enveloped me, making me feel as though my soul had stepped outside of my physical form, leaving me paralyzed in that festival parking lot while a paper cup of lemonade melted away unnoticed in my hand. Exactly 1 single week later, heavily binding legal letters would land squarely in their electronic inboxes, and certified envelopes would strike their physical mailboxes with an undeniable thud. Suddenly, the very people who had spent their weekend laughing at the degradation of my innocent child would be calling my phone non-stop, desperate for mercy. But before I reveal the stunning, defensive words my brother Caleb uttered next when cornered, and the chaotic storm that erupted after those legal demands landed on their doorsteps, I must ask you, what time is it where you are right now? And from what corner of the world are you reading this story? I desperately want to see just how far this narrative of maternal protection can travel before my family attempts to rewrite history and pretend none of this ever happened. My 6-year-old daughter, Harper, lived in a beautifully uncomplicated world. At her tender age, she still wholeheartedly believed that the absolute worst thing a grown-up could possibly do was forget to say sorry after accidentally bumping into someone on the sidewalk. She possessed absolutely no emotional vocabulary to comprehend adults who would smile warmly at you across a crowded Thanksgiving dinner table, only to turn around and laugh maliciously online while a relative publicly branded you a mistake. The car ride home from the community festival was suffocatingly quiet. My husband, Ethan Brooks, navigated the roads without turning on the vehicle's radio, allowing the silence to shield us. From the back seat, Harper chatted away happily, completely oblivious to the digital execution of her dignity. She spoke with pure excitement about the painted wooden coyote statue she had seen and the colorful sticker she had proudly received from a local pottery booth. Every single happy, innocent word that spilled from her mouth felt like a physical blow to my chest, making my brother's cruel caption feel infinitely uglier and more malicious. The moment we crossed our threshold, I focused entirely on creating a barrier of safety for her. I tucked her safely into the den, distracting her with a box of bright crayons and a fresh bowl of crisp apple slices. Once she was settled, Ethan and I locked ourselves inside the laundry room. We chose that cramped space because it was the only room in our house physically distant enough from her innocent ears to ensure she wouldn't hear the raw panic in our voices. Ethan had already sprung into action, transforming his laptop into a digital vault of evidence. He had established a dedicated folder containing screenshots, full names, precise timestamps, public reactions, and trackable shares. "Jess," he said to me in a voice that was terrifyingly quiet and steady, "your brother didn't just insult your character. He weaponized Harper's image without a shred of permission and attached a deeply cruel caption to her face. He pointed at the screen, showing me the digital trail. And your own mother actively helped it spread to her entire social circle." Hearing him say it out loud triggered a desperate, deeply ingrained survival mechanism within me. Out of pure habit, I immediately wanted to construct a defense for my mother, Diane Whitaker. I wanted to tell myself that she probably hadn't read the words carefully. I wanted to believe she mistakenly thought it was just some harmless, inside family joke. I tried to convince myself that she had simply tapped those laughing emojis absent-mindedly while scrolling through her feed. But as I stared at the spinning washing machine, the illusions shattered. I had spent my entire life inventing convenient excuses for Diane Whitaker. She was the exact definition of a mother who cared significantly less about whether the rooms inside her own home were peaceful, and infinitely more about whether the wealthy people looking in from the outside thought our family appeared respectable and perfect. For decades, I was viewed through a conditional lens. I was the daughter who had gotten pregnant at a young age, finished my university degree during exhausting late-night hours, and built a stable, honest life one grueling, exhausted year at a time. Whenever my family wanted to brag to their high society friends, they warmly labeled my journey as resilience. But the second they wanted to humble me and put me back in my designated place, they weaponized that history and called it a mistake. As we huddled in that laundry room, plotting our next move against the people who shared my blood, I had no idea that the digital poison had already leaked out of the internet and directly into my home. I was about to walk into the kitchen, only to have my 6-year-old daughter ask a question that would completely shatter my heart into pieces. Later that evening, I was standing over the stove, completely disassociated, pretending to focus on making a simple pasta dinner for my family. The illusion of domestic normalcy was instantly shattered when Harper quietly wandered into the kitchen. In her small hands, she proudly held up a drawing she had completed from the festival, a whimsical, purple coyote equipped with magnificent wings. She tilted her head, looked up at me with absolute innocence, and asked a question that made the air evaporate from the room. "Mommy, why did Grandma put laughing faces on my picture?" My physical body locked up, my hand froze instantly around the wooden spoon I was holding. Across the kitchen island, Ethan looked at me over our daughter's head, his jaw clenched so tightly that a muscle twitched in his cheek. The sheer weight of maternal protectiveness crashed over me. I deliberately knelt down on the hard floor, lowering myself to her level so she would not have to look up and witness the profound hurt and rage radiating from my own face. I selected every single syllable, as if I were barefoot and navigating a path covered in jagged, broken glass. "Sometimes grown-ups use the internet very badly," I explained gently. "But I want you to hear me clearly, you did absolutely nothing wrong." Harper gave a slow nod, but her young eyes remained intensely serious and unconvinced. Children possess an innate, terrifyingly accurate radar. They always know exactly when the adults in their lives are lying around the emotional edges to protect them. Hours later, after we finally managed to lull her into a deep sleep, I sat in the darkness and forced myself to open Caleb's malicious post once again. The toxicity had grown exponentially. It had already been shared 14 separate times across various networks. The public commentary had mutated into a playground of judgment. A prominent woman from my mother's exclusive charity circle had publicly typed, "Some people never learn consequences." Right below that, another local acquaintance left a comment that read, "This is what happens when girls grow up too fast." Reading that specific sentence caused my throat to physically close up with a suffocating wave of panic. I realized with agonizing clarity that the insult wasn't merely aimed at my innocent daughter Harper. It was a calculated, historical cruise missile aimed directly at me. It dragged me violently back to when I was 21 years old, scared, isolated, and visibly pregnant, forced to sit at my mother's pristine kitchen table while Caleb openly mocked me, calling me the ultimate family warning label. Back in those dark days, I forced myself to swallow the humiliation and accept the psychological abuse, because I was utterly destitute and desperately needed their financial survival assistance. But the year was now 2026. I was no longer that defenseless, terrified girl. I now possessed a fiercely devoted husband, an established professional career, independent financial savings, and most importantly, a child who was watching my every move to learn whether love meant suffering in agonizing silence. Yet, my family remained relentless. By the time the sun began to rise, the post remained fully public, and my mother had proudly added a new comment to the thread, "People are too sensitive these days." That cold, dismissive sentence was the exact catalyst that permanently transformed my deep grief into an unyielding legal strategy. I had reached my absolute limit. By midnight, Ethan had successfully documented every single vile comment, and by 1 a.m, I sent an urgent email to a high-powered attorney. But as I prepared to walk into my workplace the following morning, I had no idea that my brother's online malice had already breached the walls of my professional life, threatening to destroy the career I had bled for. On Monday morning, I walked through the front doors of my workplace with heavy coats of concealer masking the dark circles under my eyes and a fabricated smile that I lacked the emotional energy to genuinely wear. The Museum of Desert Discovery was by no means a glamorous or high-profile institution, but it belonged to me in the profound way a place becomes part of your soul when you have bled your own time, passion, and energy into its very foundations. My entire professional purpose was rooted in creation. I designed interactive, hands-on learning curricula for children, developing intricate fossil puzzles, implementing specialized sensory-friendly exhibit hours, organizing bilingual scavenger hunts, and hosting specialized workshops where incredibly shy, vulnerable kids could touch real clay, soft feathers, and ancient seed pods. I wanted them to leave our building truly believing that the world had plenty of room for their curiosity and questions. At its core, my job was an extension of my soul, to make children feel entirely safe enough to be curious about the universe. That precise dedication was the reason why Caleb's malicious online post could not simply remain categorized as isolated family drama. By exactly 10 o'clock that morning, the digital poison had leaked directly into my professional sanctuary. Two prominent parents, who sat on our Vital Museum donor committee, had officially discovered the viral thread. One of them took the liberty of sending a highly calculated, formal message directly to my corporate work email address. She stated in no uncertain terms that she possessed deep concerns regarding the highly public, toxic conflict involving a young child directly connected to an active museum staff member. Minutes later, the second donor reached out, pointedly inquiring whether the museum's official social media conduct policy adequately covered hostile online disputes generated by employees. The sheer malice of the situation hit me like a physical blow. My brother had deliberately weaponized my daughter's innocent face, fueled by his deeply rooted, decade-long resentment toward my life, fully backed by my mother's public approval, and transformed it into a weapon specifically calibrated to dismantle my professional reputation and livelihood. I sat paralyzed in my private office, entirely surrounded by colorful paper lizards and large foam cactus cutouts, rereading those corporate warnings over and over while the muffled, joyful sounds of a group of preschoolers singing echoed from the classroom directly next door. Relief finally arrived during my lunch break when my phone rang. It was the attorney, Maureen Cole. I had saved her corporate business card months prior following a routine museum liability seminar. The moment she spoke, her voice carried the precise, razor-sharp calmness of a seasoned legal warrior, someone who knew exactly how vicious and ugly families could truly become the exact moment real consequences arrived wrapped in formal, legal language. Maureen analyzed the digital landscape with absolute precision. She affirmed that the non-consensual photo mattered legally. The derogatory caption mattered. The hostile public comments left by third parties mattered. The undeniable fact that Harper was a vulnerable minor mattered immensely. And the continuous, documented engagement from my immediate relatives added immense weight to our case. Maureen gave me a series of strict, unyielding rules to follow: do not engage with him emotionally, do not type a single argument in the public comments, and preserve every single scrap of text. She instructed me to issue one final, written demand for immediate removal. If he refused or escalated, we would unleash formal legal notices. My stomach dropped at the thought of total legal warfare, but I had no choice. I sent the text ultimatum. But I was entirely unprepared for Caleb's unhinged response, which would send a whole new wave of online harassment crashing directly onto my phone. When Maureen Cole uttered the words "formal notice," a heavy wave of nausea washed over my stomach. Despite the escalating hostility, a small, wounded part of my inner child still desperately yearned for a different reality. I wanted my mother to call me, use a gentle voice, and admit that she had been profoundly wrong. Instead, my phone lit up at exactly 12:37 p.m., with a call from Diane Whitaker. The moment I answered, she bypassed any greeting and opened with a sharp accusation: "Are you really making a massive ordeal out of Caleb's harmless little joke?" Seeking privacy, I stepped out of my office and into the cramped storage hallway, wedging myself tightly between large plastic bins overflowing with children's puppet supplies. I pressed the phone hard against my ear, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. "He publicly labeled my daughter a mistake," I whispered into the receiver. My mother let out a heavy, dramatic sigh. It was that familiar, deeply theatrical sigh she had used my entire life whenever she wanted to make me feel small, irrational, and inherently childish. "Jessica, you always insist on interpreting every single thing as a personal attack," she lectured coldly. "Caleb is under an immense amount of professional pressure right now. His home staging business has been incredibly slow. He desperately needs online engagement to boost his visibility. Surely you understand how modern social media algorithms work." For several agonizing seconds, I literally could not draw breath to speak. The horrifying reality crystallized in my mind: my innocent, 6-year-old daughter had been intentionally transformed into corporate engagement to feed her brother's ego. And my own mother had just openly admitted to this exploitation without a single shred of maternal shame. "Take the post down immediately," I commanded, my voice hardening. "Tell him to delete it right now and issue a full apology." My mother's tone instantly turned to stone. "Do not dare threaten your older brother over a simple Facebook caption, Jessica," she snapped. I stared blankly at a nearby plastic storage bin labeled kindergarten touch table, feeling the final threads of familial loyalty snap. "I am not threatening him, Mom," I responded with icy clarity. "I am warning you both that you have crossed a line that you can never uncross." Later that afternoon, I composed a single, formal text message to Caleb, crafting the phrasing exactly as my attorney had advised. I wrote, Remove the post utilizing Harper's image and caption by 6 p.m. today. Do not repost, share, or reference her identity ever again. Please confirm via text when it has been completely removed. He responded exactly 20 minutes later, sending nothing but a mocking, looping laughing GIF. He then immediately escalated the war. Caleb uploaded a public Instagram story featuring a screenshot of my private text ultimatum. He had partially scribbled over my name, but left more than enough visible for his thousands of followers to identify me. His new public caption read, "When people weaponize motherhood because they can't take a joke." Instantly, my phone began to violently vibrate again. This time, it wasn't just judgmental extended relatives. It was an influx of total strangers. Aggressive men with sunglasses in their profile pictures and hostile women from local community groups began bombarding my accounts. Then, the ultimate boundary was breached. An anonymous user posted directly on the museum's public business page, "Maybe your staff should learn basic humor before they attempt to teach innocent kids." The professional walls were crumbling around me. I walked to my office door, locked it tight, and sank directly onto the floor behind my desk. For 5 uninterrupted minutes, I let my entire body physically shake from the sheer terror and rage. Then, I opened my laptop, compiled the new violations, and forwarded everything to Marin. The digital mob was at my gates, but the domestic fallout was even more devastating. That evening, as my traumatized daughter pushed her food around her plate, she looked up and asked if her uncle was furious because of something she had done. It was the exact moment I agreed to meet Caleb face-to-face in a local cafe, determined to look him in the eye, unaware that he was about to unleash a level of raw, historical family malice that would leave me utterly breathless. At home that evening, the atmospheric weight was palpable. Ethan quietly cooked dinner, because my mind was so shattered I kept forgetting what objects I was physically holding in my hands. Harper was uncharacteristically silent, a state of being that terrified me far more than an avalanche of questions. She sat listlessly, pushing green peas aimlessly around her porcelain plate, before finally whispering, "Is Uncle Caleb mad because of me?" Ethan set his fork down on the table so slowly it made absolutely no audible sound. I immediately moved to her chair, kneeling down and securely holding both of her tiny, trembling hands in mine. "No, baby. Grown-ups are entirely responsible for their own personal choices. You are never, ever responsible for anyone else choosing to be unkind." She gave a small nod, but heavy tears pooled and filled her eyes anyway. That precise image was the exact moment I completely stopped agonizing over whether pursuing aggressive legal action would make me a bad daughter, or a toxic sister. The absolute only question left illuminating my conscience was whether doing absolutely nothing would make me a truly bad mother. I officially agreed to meet Caleb on Wednesday morning at a local establishment called Juniper and Stone. It was a modern, trendy cafe characterized by pristine white walls, vibrant blue mugs, and a clientele that instinctively lowered their speaking voices the very second they sensed interpersonal drama entering the room. I deliberately selected a highly public venue because I did not trust his manipulative nature not to completely twist the contents of our conversation later on. I also wore my official structured museum blazer. I desperately needed an emotional suit of armor, even if it was constructed out of simple linen, and a staff name tag I had completely forgotten to remove before leaving the house. Caleb sauntered into the cafe exactly 12 minutes late, his expensive sunglasses pushed carelessly up into his styled hair, radiating a thick cloud of costly cologne and deeply performative confidence. He leaned down and casually kissed the air right near my cheek, acting as if we were rubbing elbows at a high-end charity fundraiser rather than confronting a familial crisis. "Jess," he drawled smoothly, sliding his body into the opposite wooden chair, "you look incredibly intense." Without breaking eye contact, I placed my smartphone perfectly flat and face down on the center of the wooden table. I intentionally started a digital audio recording, operating legally, completely openly, with the illuminated recording screen fully visible to his eyes. "This conversation is being recorded," I stated flatly. His smug, condescending smirk immediately faltered. "Wow, look at us, we are doing court TV now," he mocked, attempting to reclaim control. "No," I responded, "we are doing clarity." He leaned back in his seat, feigning amusement once more. "Fine then, say your little piece." I had meticulously rehearsed dozens of furious, articulate speeches while standing in the shower, driving my car, and packing Harper's school lunchbox. But the moment I looked across at his narcissistic face, all those grand monologues evaporated. All I could see was the heartbreaking image of my 6-year-old daughter staring blankly at her morning cereal, wondering if she was the source of a family war. So, I kept my speaking voice terrifyingly low and steady. "You uploaded my young child's photograph without a shred of legal permission. You publicly branded her a mistake. You willfully allowed vicious online strangers to insult her character and mine. And then you went a step further and reposted my private text message solely for cheap social media attention. I demand that you delete every single post immediately and issue a comprehensive, public apology." Caleb rolled his eyes with theatrical boredom. "I didn't call Harper a mistake, Jessica. I called your pathetic life choices a mistake. There is a massive, distinct difference between those two things." The words cut through the air with such clean, unadulterated cruelty that a sick part of me almost admired how little he even attempted to mask his malice. "You intentionally utilized her physical picture because it made your pathetic joke obvious to everyone," I countered sharply. Caleb leaned forward, his voice dropping to an aggressive whisper. "She is currently 6 years old, and you were a mere 21 when you got yourself pregnant, Jessica. Are we all supposed to continuously sit around and pretend that your reckless actions didn't completely derail this entire family's trajectory?" At the adjacent table, a stylish woman completely stopped stirring her coffee, her spoon frozen mid-air. I felt a fierce, burning heat climb rapidly up the back of my neck, but I absolutely refused to look away or break my gaze from his eyes. "You don't mean it derailed the family, Caleb," I asserted coldly. "You mean it permanently derailed Mom's pristine, curated fantasy of what her children were supposed to look like to her social circle." Caleb's entire face tightened with sudden, genuine fury. "No, I mean you were showered with endless praise and adulation for simply surviving a catastrophic mess that you entirely created yourself, while I was continuously criticized, pressured, and blamed for not being absolutely flawless every single second of my life. Every single family dinner we've had for a decade instantly became centered around poor Jessica. Brave Jessica. Look at how incredibly strong Jessica is. You literally constructed an entire adult personality out of your consequences." There it lay, fully exposed on the cafe table. It was never about social media humor. It wasn't just a poorly thought-out, off-color joke. It was a full decade of unadulterated, toxic sibling resentment finally wearing a public internet caption. The monster was out of the closet, but Caleb wasn't finished venting his venom. Before our meeting concluded, he was about to launch a devastating attack against my husband Ethan, followed by an explicit threat against my employment that would completely change the stakes of this legal battle. I stared at my older brother, horror and clarity swirling in my chest. "And your ultimate solution to resolving your decade of internal resentment was to publicly humiliate an innocent 6-year-old child?" I asked, my voice deadly quiet. Caleb's mouth twitched with deep agitation. "Your husband is the one making you absurdly dramatic, Jessica. Let's be completely honest. He isn't even Harper's biological father, yet he struts around acting as if he completely owns this entire family now." The metal legs of my chair scraped violently against the cafe's polished floor before I even consciously realized my body was moving. I leaned down, planting my palms flat on the table. "Do you dare breathe Ethan's name out of your mouth again?" I warned. Caleb's lips curved into a smug smile. He mistakenly believed he had successfully uncovered a raw nerve to exploit. See, that is the core issue right there, he gloated, leaning back arrogantly. You went out and completely replaced your actual blood relatives. And now you want to ruthlessly punish us simply because we refuse to stand around clapping for your new life. I stood fully upright, towering over him, but I refused to flee the scene just yet. I wanted to ensure he heard and absorbed every single syllable. No, Caleb, I stated with absolute conviction. The truth is, I have permanently stopped begging cruel people to love my daughter quietly. That is not replacement. That is called basic parenting. He lazily lifted both of his hands in a gesture of dismissive defiance. Go ahead and send your pathetic little lawyer letter then. I happen to know highly influential people in this city. Do you honestly want local museum donors and elite charity boards finding out exactly how psychologically unstable you truly are? That was the shocking twist I had completely failed to anticipate. He wasn't merely doubling down on his refusal to apologize, he was actively, explicitly blackmailing my professional livelihood and threatening my career. With completely steady hands, I reached down and picked up my recording smartphone from the tabletop. Thank you so much for explicitly confirming your malicious intent on tape, I said calmly. His arrogant smile completely vanished from his face. What the hell is that supposed to mean? He demanded, his voice dropping. It means, I replied, turning away, that you just handed my attorney everything she needs to destroy you. I walked out of the establishment before he could assemble a response. Once inside the isolated safety of my parked car, I sat in the driver's seat and replayed the digital recording exactly once. His cruel voice filled the small, enclosed vehicle space. I didn't call Harper a mistake. I called your life choices a mistake. I immediately exported the audio file straight to Marin Cole. Then, I sent a brief text to Ethan. He admitted everything on tape. Ethan's reply arrived instantly, come straight home. We will handle this together. For the absolute first time in that agonizing week, I actually believed him. The following Monday morning, our formal legal letters went out via certified mail, and they were absolutely merciless. Marin had meticulously drafted separate, targeted legal notices to Caleb and my mother, Diane Whitaker. Caleb's letter explicitly demanded the immediate, permanent removal of all digital media containing Harper's likeness, a formal written apology, total preservation of all communications, and a strict, immediate halt to any contact with my employer, museum financial donors, or local community partners. My mother's notice, however, was structured differently and hit a far more devastating nerve. It explicitly named her active participation in amplifying the defamatory post, her public comments actively dismissing the psychological harm inflicted on a minor, and her high-profile position within local charity circles where her words carried immense societal influence. Diane had spent decades meticulously constructing a flawless social identity centered around being the elegant, philanthropic mother who chaired high society luncheons, arranged elaborate silent auctions, and publicly lectured about protecting vulnerable children in our community. Now, she was legally receiving a certified document demanding answers as to why she had publicly laughed at the online degradation of her very own granddaughter. The legal trap had snapped shut. By 9:14 a.m., my phone began to ring furiously as Caleb and my mother realized their reputations were on the verge of annihilation. But as the family panic escalated into outright war, a hidden secret regarding my brother's business and my mother's money was about to be dragged into the light, shifting this battle from a family dispute into a full-blown criminal scandal. The fallout was instantaneous and explosive. At exactly 9:14 a.m., Caleb's name flashed across my phone screen. I let it ring out into silence. At 9:16 a.m., my mother called. I refused to answer. By 9:18 a.m., a text from Caleb buzzed through, "You've completely lost your mind." At 9:21 a.m., my mother's text arrived, "Call me this exact instant before you completely destroy this family." At 9:30 a.m., Ethan calmly confiscated my phone, placed it deep inside a kitchen drawer, and looked at me. They no longer have access to you, Jess. They can speak directly to Marin. But they didn't want to speak to an attorney. They desperately wanted the old version of Jessica, the vulnerable, insecure version, who could be easily pressured, heavily guilted, cornered in a room, and constantly reminded that family loyalty meant absorbing horrific emotional injuries in absolute silence. By noon, the metrics of their panic were clear. Caleb had called 19 separate times. My mother had attempted to call 11 times. Soon, the extended family flying monkeys began to circle. An estranged cousin left a frantic, guilt-tripping voicemail claiming that my legal actions were directly taking food out of Caleb's mouth. Another relative sent an incredibly derogatory message declaring that taking legal action against your own blood was nothing but ghetto behavior, a phrase that exposed exactly how maliciously they had always framed my life behind my back when I wasn't in the room to defend myself. Then, the second massive wave of consequences struck Caleb's life. His luxury home staging business had a highly lucrative, massive partnership pending with an upscale boutique real estate firm that specialized exclusively in high-end, family-friendly relocation clients. Unbeknownst to us, an executive at that firm had officially seen the viral screenshots of Caleb's cruel post because his very own social media followers had begun spreading them across local networks. The corporate firm formally demanded that he explain his public behavior regarding a minor. Blinded by outright panic, Caleb scrambled and deleted the original Coyote post entirely, but the deletion came far too late. The digital receipts had already traveled infinitely farther across the internet than his superficial charm could ever hope to reach. That exact evening, my mother materialized on our front doorstep. She stood under the porch light, clutching the physical certified legal envelope in her hand as if it were a contaminated, dead animal. Ethan opened the front door, but his posture was firm. He deliberately did not invite her inside our home immediately. "Is Harper awake right now?" she demanded sharply. "No," Ethan replied flatly. "Good," she snapped with immense venom, "because apparently every single word that exits my mouth is considered legal evidence now." I immediately stepped up to the doorway, standing firmly beside my husband. "If you have traveled here to offer a genuine apology, you are welcome to come inside. But if you have come here to lay the blame on me, you can turn around and leave right now." My mother's eyes flashed with absolute rage. "Apologize? Caleb is on the verge of losing a massive real estate contract because of your petty vindictiveness." I matched her fiery gaze with absolute stone. "Caleb is on the verge of losing a contract because he deliberately chose to use a helpless child as a public punchline, and then explicitly threatened my professional job." Losing all decorum, Diane aggressively pushed past Ethan's shoulder, forcing her way straight into our private entryway. But for once in his life, my husband did not step aside politely to accommodate her high society entitlement. He instantly pivoted, blocking the main hallway completely with his broad physical frame, entirely calm, yet utterly immovable. "Diane," he said in a tone that vibrated with low authority, "you need to lower your voice in this house immediately." She glared up at him, as if he were a piece of inanimate living room furniture that had suddenly dared to speak back to her. "This matter involves family," she hissed. Ethan didn't blink. "So is Harper." That single statement successfully shut her mouth for half a second, freezing her in her tracks. My mother was silenced, but the desperate frantic energy radiating from her was hiding a much darker reality. As she broke down and exposed the massive financial web connecting her retirement funds to Caleb's failing business, my attorney Morin was simultaneously uncovering a whistleblower statement from Caleb's former assistant that would completely blow their secrets wide open. The temporary silence in our entryway didn't soften my mother. Instead, she instantly pivoted to her next tactical weapon, perfectly prepared, manipulative tears. She turned to me, her voice trembling with orchestrated despair. "Jessica, do you have even the slightest concept of what your poor brother is enduring right now? He has been forced to borrow massive amounts of money just to keep his business afloat. He has major corporate clients actively pulling back their contracts. He is utterly embarrassed. I stared back at her without a single shred of pity. He absolutely should be embarrassed, I delivered flatly. Driven by desperation, Diane blurted out a truth she had heavily guarded. I gave him a massive portion of the money straight out of my personal retirement account. He literally cannot afford any form of legal trouble right now. There it was, the very first major crack in their pristine family wall. Ethan shot a knowing glance in my direction, while I locked eyes with my mother. Exactly how much of your retirement money did you give him, Mom? I demanded. She quickly looked away, her posture stiffening. That is absolutely none of your concern. But it became my absolute concern exactly 2 days later, when Murrin Cole forwarded a massive digital packet to my email. The explosive information came directly from Caleb's former executive assistant, a woman named Belle. Belle had witnessed his malicious online posts about my daughter, and decided she was completely finished protecting his fraudulent secrets. Belle explicitly exposed that Caleb had been systematically exploiting my mother's elite charity contacts to illegally promote his staging business, covertly offering deeply discounted, under-the-table design consultations directly at exclusive fundraising galas. Even worse, Belle revealed that Caleb had frequently drafted social media posts directly from my mother's personal accounts before, leaving it legally ambiguous whether Diane had actually typed those 3 laughing emojis herself, or if she had willfully granted Caleb access to her profile to amplify my public humiliation. Suddenly, this nightmare had evolved far beyond a single cruel Facebook caption. It exposed a deeply corrupt family machine that used social reputation as a weaponized currency, and my innocent 6-year-old daughter had been chewed up as mere collateral damage. Murrin gave me a firm directive to breathe before laying out our master strategy. We don't need to file a formal lawsuit just yet, she explained with calm precision. What we need is absolute leverage, comprehensive documentation, and a tightly controlled demand. If they desperately want this kept quiet, they will repair the damage both publicly and privately. I asked her what real repair could even look like, noting that no amount of money could unmake my daughter's heartbreaking question, and no typed apology could ever erase the internet's bile. Murrin answered with a sentence that permanently scorched my soul: repair is not magic, Jessica. It is consequence made visible. The ultimate confrontation occurred on a tense Friday afternoon inside my very own living room. We stood directly beneath the colorful paper stars that Harper and I had meticulously crafted together for a museum craft night. Murrin Cole attended the meeting via a secure live video call displayed on Ethan's laptop screen. My mother and Caleb had absolutely no idea a lawyer would be present until they walked through the front door. Both of them arrived dressed immaculately, as if they were attending a corporate board meeting where superficial appearances could still save their sinking reputations. Caleb wore a tailored navy jacket, my mother wore her signature strand of elegant pearls. I, however, intentionally wore plain denim jeans and absolutely zero makeup. I was entirely finished costuming my physical appearance for people who had spent a lifetime mistaking my emotional softness for physical weakness. This entire situation is completely ridiculous, Caleb sneered the exact second his eyes landed on the laptop screen. You actually brought a high-priced lawyer into your own home, against your own flesh and blood brother. Murrin's sharp voice instantly cut through the laptop speakers. Good afternoon, Mr. Whitaker. Please be advised that this meeting is entirely voluntary. You are perfectly free to stand up and leave at any time. But he didn't move an inch. And that was the exact moment I knew that real, terrifying fear had finally entered the room. I calmly walked over and placed a thick, heavy manila folder flat on the center of the coffee table. Inside was the entire anatomy of their cruelty, high-resolution screenshots of the original post, every single toxic comment, the Instagram story mocking my private text, the full certified transcript of our cafe recording, the formal donor complaint messages, the museum page harassment logs, their frantic call logs, and Belle's damning whistleblower statement. My mother stared down at the physical weight of the folder, but her hand trembled so much she refused to touch it. "Jessica," she pleaded, adopting that polished, melodious voice she typically utilized at high-end charity luncheons, "surely we can resolve this private misunderstanding without humiliating anyone further." I let out a sharp, joyless laugh. "Humiliating anyone further, Mom?" I demanded, my voice rising. "My innocent daughter Harper was publicly humiliated first. I am simply refusing to keep her pain a secret just to protect your social comfort." Caleb aggressively leaned forward over the table. "She is 6 years old, Jessica. She doesn't even possess the cognitive ability to understand half of this drama." I took a step closer to him. She understood enough to look me in the eyes and ask why her own grandmother branded her a mistake. Caleb's arrogant expression violently twitched. My mother instantly closed her eyes tight. For the absolute first time in my adult life, I witnessed a genuine flash of raw, unedited shame cross her face, but Caleb desperately rushed to fill the suffocating silence before that shame could take root. "You obviously coached her to say that," he shouted defensively. Caleb had just crossed the ultimate line, accusing me of exploiting my own traumatized child. Ethan stepped forward so fast the entire air in the living room shifted, and as the final trap was sprung, my brother and mother were about to realize that the terms of their surrender would strip away everything they held dear. Ethan stepped forward so rapidly that the air in the room shifted, delivering a low, terrifyingly calm warning, "Careful." Caleb mocked him, claiming I dramatized everything, but I silenced him by pulling out the printed transcript from our cafe meeting, reading his explicit insults and threats aloud. My mother looked at Caleb in absolute shock, realizing he had confirmed his malicious intent on a completely legal audio recording. His confidence fractured, and he angrily confessed his deep sibling resentment, shouting that I was worshipped for being strong while he was constantly treated like a disappointment unless he performed perfect success to feed our mother's social vanity. The room went entirely silent, as I realized Caleb was a cruel product of my mother's obsession with appearances. She had curated him into the golden child, me into the cautionary tale, and my innocent daughter into proof that my mistake continued. I firmly delivered our non-negotiable terms. Caleb must post a comprehensive public apology drafted by Morin, pin it for 30 days without making a profit, issue retractions to the real estate firm and donors, and make a painful financial contribution to the museum sensory fund. Furthermore, my mother had to immediately step down from her prestigious charity luncheon committee or face total public exposure. As my mother broke down into raw, unpolished tears, Harper's bedroom door creaked open. Standing there in her yellow pajamas holding her stuffed rabbit, she softly asked, "Mommy, is Grandma sad because of me?" I knelt down, holding her, and explained that Grandma was sad because grown-ups made bad choices and now had to fix them. That night, a profound rule was cemented in our home: sorry means you change. 3 days later, Caleb's plain black and white public apology went live, acknowledging the severe harm he caused by using a child as a punchline. He lost his real estate partnership anyway, as his own toxic pattern exposed his deceptive image. My mother ultimately visited us, sitting across from Harper to deliver a true, heartfelt apology, affirming that my daughter was deeply loved and never a mistake. Weeks later, Harper and I stood inside the museum's new sensory room, watching children play safely near desert murals funded entirely by Caleb's forced restitution. The very insult that tried to shrink my daughter had helped build a sanctuary of safety. I watched her laugh, knowing nobody owned her image but her. I finally understood that evidence isn't collected for revenge. It is gathered so people cannot force you to doubt your own pain. Blood is never a license to harm, protection is never drama, and true love means being brave enough to break the pattern before it ever reaches your child.